The world of Islam as a new civilization. As the religion spread and the Abbasid dynasty declined, the civilization of Islam, unlike that of China but similar to Western Christendom, operated without a dominant political center, bound more by a shared religious culture than by a shared state. Twice that civilization was threatened from outside. The most serious intrusion came during the 13th century from the Mongols, whose conquest of Central Asia and Persia proved devastating while incorporating many Muslims within the huge Mongol domains. Less serious but more well-known, at least in the West, were the Christian Crusades, who established in the 12th and 13th centuries several small and temporary outposts along the eastern Mediterranean. Despite these external threats and its various internal conflicts, Islamic civilization flourished and often prospered, embracing at least parts of virtually every other civilization in the Afro-Eurasian hemisphere. It was in that sense history's first truly global civilization, although the Americas, of course, were not involved. What held this Islamic world together? What enabled many peoples to feel themselves part of a single civilization despite its political fragmentation, religious controversies, and cultural and regional diversity? Networks of faith. At the core of that vast civilization was a common commitment to Islam. No group was more important in the transmission of those beliefs and practices than the ulama. These learned scholars were not priests in the Christian sense, for in Islam, at least theoretically, no person could stand between the believer and Allah. Rather, they served as judges, interpreters, administrators, prayer leaders, and reciters of the Quran, but especially as preservers and teachers of the Sharia. Supported mostly by their local communities, some also received the patronage of sultans or rulers and were therefore subject to criticism for corruption and undue submission to state authority. In their homes, mosques, shrines, and Quranic schools, the ulama passed on the core teachings of the faith. Beginning in the 11th century, formal colleges called madrasas offered more advanced instruction in the Quran and the sayings of Muhammad. Grammar and rhetoric, sometimes philosophy, theology, mathematics, and medicine, and above all else, law. Teaching was informal, mostly oral, and involved much memorization of texts. It was also largely conservative, seeking to preserve an established body of Islamic learning. The ulama were an international elite, and the system of education they created served to bind together an immense and diverse civilization. Common texts were shared widely across the world of Islam. Students and teachers alike traveled great distances in search of the most learned scholars. From Indonesia to West Africa, educated Muslims inhabited a shared world of debate and reference. Paralleling the educational network of the ulama were the emerging religious orders of the Sufis. By the 10th century, particular Sufi sheikhs, or teachers, began to attract groups of disciples who were eager to learn their unique devotional practices and techniques of personal transformation. The disciples usually swore allegiance to their teacher and valued highly the chain of transmission by which those teachings and practices had come down from earlier masters. In the 12th and 13th centuries, Sufis began to organize in a variety of larger associations, some limited to particular regions and others with chapters throughout the Islamic world. The Qadiriyya order, for example, began in Baghdad, but spread widely throughout the Arab world and into sub-Saharan Africa. Sufi orders were especially significant in the frontier regions of Islam because they followed conquering armies or traders into Central and Southeast Asia, India, Anatolia, parts of Africa, and elsewhere. Their devotional teachings, modest ways of living, and reputation for supernatural powers gained a hearing for the new faith. Their emphasis on personal experience of the divine rather than on the law allowed the Sufis to accommodate elements of local belief and practice and encourage the growth of a popular or blended Islam. The veneration of deceased Sufi saints or friends of God, particularly at their tombs, created sacred spaces that enabled Islam to take root in many places despite its foreign origins. But that flexibility also often earned Sufi practitioners the enmity of the ulama, who were sharply critical of any deviations from the Sharia. Like the madrasas and the Sharia, Sufi religious ideas and institutions spanned the Islamic world and were yet another thread in the cosmopolitan web of Islamic civilization. Particular devotional teachings and practices spread widely, as did the writings of such famous Sufi poets as Hafiz and Rumi. Devotees made pilgrimages to the distant tombs of famous teachers who they often believed might intercede with God on their behalf. Wandering Sufis in search of the wisdom of renowned sheikhs found fellow seekers and welcomed shelters in the compounds of these religious orders. In addition to the networks of the Sufis and the Ulama, many thousands of people, from kings to peasants, made the grand pilgrimage to Mecca, the Hajj, no doubt gaining some sense of the Ummah. There, men and women together, hailing from all over the Islamic world, joined as one people to rehearse the central elements of their faith. The claims of local identities based on family, clan, tribe, ethnicity, or state never disappeared, but now overarching them was all the inclusive unity of the Muslim community. Networks of exchange. The world of Islamic civilization cohered not only as a network of faith, but also as an immense arena of exchange in which goods, technologies, food products, and ideas circulated widely. Now large areas of the Afro-Eurasian world operated within a single political system, practiced Islam, and spoke Arabic. This huge region rapidly became a vast trading zone of hemispheric dimensions. In part, this was due to its central location in the Afro-Eurasian world and the breaking down of earlier political barriers between the Byzantine and Persian empires. Furthermore, commerce was valued positively within Islamic teaching, and laws regulating it figured prominently in the Sharia, creating a predictable framework for exchange across many cultures. The pilgrimage to Mecca, as well as the urbanization that accompanied the growth of Islamic civilization, likewise fostered commerce. Baghdad, established in 756 as the capital of the Abbasid Empire, soon grew into a magnificent city of 500,000 people. The appetite of urban elites for luxury goods stimulated both craft production and the desire for foreign products. Thus, Muslim merchants, Arabs, and Persians in particular, quickly became prominent and sometimes dominant players in all the major Afro-Eurasian trade routes of the Third Wave era, in the Mediterranean Sea, along the revived Silk Roads, across the Sahara, and throughout the Indian Ocean basin. By the 8th century, Arab and Persian traders had established a commercial colony in Canton in southern China, thus linking the Islamic heartland with Asia's other giant and flourishing economy. Various forms of banking, partnerships, business contracts, and instruments for granting credit facilitated these long-distance economic relationships and generated a prosperous, sophisticated, and highly commercialized economy that spanned the Old World. The vast expanse of Islamic civilization also contributed to ecological change as agricultural products and practices spread from one region to another, a process already underway in the earlier Roman and Persian empires. Among the food crops that circulated within and beyond the Islamic world were different varieties of sugarcane, rice, apricots, artichokes, eggplants, lemons, oranges, almonds, figs, and bananas. Equally significant were water management practices so important to the arid or semi-arid environments of many of the Islamic world. Persian-style reservoirs and irrigation technologies spread as far as Tunisia and Morocco, the northern fringes of the Sahara, Spain, and Yemen. By connecting different environmental zones, particularly those where water availability was the major obstacle to agricultural growth, particular regions could draw upon a wide range of crops and practices. All of this contributed to an Islamic green revolution of increased food production as well as to population growth, urbanization, and industrial development across the Islamic world. Technology too diffused wisely within the realm of Islam. Muslim technicians made improvements on rockets first developed in China by developing one that carried a small warhead and another used to attack ships. Papermaking techniques entered the Abbasid Empire from China in the 8th century or earlier, with paper mills soon operating in Persia, Iraq, and Egypt. This revolutionary technology, which everywhere served to strengthen bureaucratic governments, passed from the Middle East into India and Europe over the following centuries. Everywhere it spurred the emergence of books and written culture at the expense of earlier orally based cultural expressions. Ideas likewise circulated across the Islamic world. The religion itself drew heavily and quite openly on Jewish and Christian precedents. Persia also contributed much in the way of bureaucratic practice, court ritual, and poetry, with Persian becoming a major literary language in elite circles. Scientific, medical, and philosophical texts, especially from ancient Greece, the Hellenistic world, and India, were systematically translated into Arabic, providing an enormous boost to Islamic scholarship and science for several centuries. In 830, the Abbasid Caliph al-Ma'mun, himself a poet and scholar with a passion for foreign language learning, established the House of Wisdom in Baghdad as an academic center for this research and translation. Stimulated by Greek texts, a school of Islamic thinkers known as Mutazilites, those who stand apart, argued that reason rather than revelation was the surest way to truth. In the long run, however, the philosophers' emphasis on logic, rationality, and the laws of nature was subject to increasing criticism by those who held that only the Quran, the sayings of the Prophet, or mystical experience represented a genuine path to God. But the realm of Islam was much more than a museum of ancient achievements from the civilization that it encompassed. Those traditions mixed and blended to generate a distinctive Islamic civilization with many new contributions to the world of learning. Using Indian numerical notation, for example, Arab scholars developed algebra as a novel mathematical discipline. They also undertook much original work in astronomy and optics. They built on earlier Greek and Indian practice to create a remarkable tradition in medicine and pharmacology. Arab physicians such as Al-Razi and Ibn Sina accurately diagnosed many diseases, such as hay fever, measles, smallpox, diphtheria, rabies, and diabetes. In addition, treatments such as using a mercury ointment for scabies, cataract and hernia operations, and filling teeth with gold emerged from Arab doctors. The first hospitals, traveling clinics, and examinations for physicians and pharmacologists were also developed within the Islamic world. In the 11th and 12th centuries, this enormous body of Arab medical scholarship entered Europe via Spain, and it remained at the core of European medical practice for many centuries.